We're rolling into another edition of the Talkin Solutions Podcast. And in this episode, our focus is going to be on the continent of Africa. I'm sitting down with the managing director of Acre Fund, Mr. Matt Forti. And Matt, how are you today? And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, doing great. Really excited to be here.
And Matt, just tell us quickly, if you could, what is the Acre Fund and what is it that you do that provides such great solutions in the work that you've done over in the continent of Africa?
Yeah, so One Acre Fund is a nonprofit social enterprise, and we exist to basically address the fact that there's somewhere around 50 million small-scale farmers in Africa who still can't feed their families consistently all year round. We try to provide the resources, the tools, the techniques to really help those farmers to grow more food, be able to store their food, consume it, and then sell it into the markets to get some surplus. So that's our job.
Love it. Fantastic. And as part of that, Matt, just tell us a little bit about your background, like what made you as part of the Acre Fund and the managing director. I know you've been there for a while now. What was it about Africa? How did you kind of spark this interest and see this as a problem and you and being amongst your team members as well, the ones that could provide a solution to this problem and really enhance these farmers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd be lying if I didn't say it was serendipity, maybe 90%, and then 10% everything else. I was in business school about 16 years ago. Became very good friends with an individual who then became One Acre Fund's CEO and founder. And his side trip to Africa in the summer between our 2 years of school is really what inspired One Acre Fund. And he had the opportunity to visit rural Kenya during what's known as the hungry season. And this is kind of the time when farmers have almost made their way through the previous staple crop harvest, maize, beans, etc. They're consuming the little that's left, and they're just eking out, trying to get to that next one. And it's a very sad time. It's a time when children are visibly malnourished. They're out of school. Some of them do pass away. And so he got very just kind of engrossed with this question of how is it that farmers that have enough land to certainly feed their families if they were yielding what not even just the U.S. and Europe, Latin America, Asia, any other region of the world is able to get. Why is it that those families are still stuck in these perpetual cycles of hunger and poverty? So I was one of the first to kind of get involved when he came back to school, very inspired by his vision, his idea of, let's figure out what's made agriculture successful everywhere else around the world the past few decades. Let's figure out how to bring that to rural communities in Africa and really give these families the tools to lift themselves out of hunger and poverty.
Yeah, and on that note, Matt, you talk a lot about how farming and agriculture in general can help these families and these communities lift themselves up. But I think for some people, they may not understand the impact and the ripple effects that having good farming practices has and what that might mean to affect other things like education and things of that nature as well. So just kind of explain to the audience a little bit, if you will, why farming is such a crucial aspect and the efficiency and to have good yields and things of that nature, and then kind of how that affects communities and things of that nature as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So farming is just, it's the dominant activity of not only Africa's poor, but the world's poor. And so you've got somewhere around 70% of Africa's poor are earning their living as farmers. They may have small amounts of income coming from day laboring or micro businesses, but this is really the primary economic driver for their family. And obviously, it's also their food supply, right? And so what you're talking about is how can we help families to grow more food so that their children don't experience these spells of hunger? But, it's also about nutrition, right? How do we help families grow a diverse set of foods that are covering all the major food groups so that children are not only hungry, avoiding hunger, but also avoiding malnourishment? And then, when you think about farming, it also is sort of the major driver of the world's land use, right? So you're also talking about, can we enrich the soils instead of continuing to deplete them? Can we mop up carbon in the soils and in trees and in other crops so we're not contributing to the climate crisis? And then finally, you mentioned education. the primary driver of what farmers are doing with their extra income after they solve their food problem is actually investing in education. Primary school throughout much of Africa at this point is free, but you still have to pay for uniforms and books. And then secondary school is not. And a semester of secondary school is generally going to be about a third of the family's entire income, just to give you a sense for one child. So when you're able to increase families' yields and incomes dramatically, now they're finally able to put their kids through secondary school, maybe even beyond. So over multiple generations, you can start to really get the family going to a new level.
That's fantastic. Yeah, wow. That's quite a lot of the income that's involved just to get your kid to school at that level. That's quite a lot. I wouldn't have expected that. But, I think something that kind of pairs with that too that you mentioned is that proper nutrition and getting those needs of food met. And, when I think about that too, I think about higher performance in school and education as well. I think about
Absolutely.
more productivity. I think people kind of forget that as well when it comes to getting proper nutrition, just how much that impacts our psychological state, our mental state, and our physical state as well. So I think that
Absolutely.
that's really an important aspect, if you will, on that front. And Matt, too, you mentioned this one a little bit as well. And this was kind of the resources and then what climate change, in order to mitigate those effects and things of that nature as well. So what are some of the challenges of maybe, getting some of those resources or providing the education that's needed to these farmers and kind of pair that in addition to with also trying to keep things, practical and maybe more regenerative and things of that nature as well with climate change. But at the same time, you're also just focused on getting people these food needs met. So how do you kind of balance those two or maybe combine and incorporate them?
Yeah, so the first thing we have to figure out is how do we mobilize resources, financial resources. And the great thing about working with small scale farmers, particularly when you work with them in groups, is that you're able to kind of eliminate the risk of, let's say, 10 farmers are in a group that you and I are a part of, and I have a health emergency or a funeral or some other big expense. The rest of the group is actually able to come in and support that farmer through the season, help that farmer to make their repayment. That way, the whole group can kind of re-enroll and farm again with us. So when you have a sort of situation like that, all you have to do is really mobilize the resources, financial resources. That's what we do. That's our job as One Acre Fund. We're able to lend those resources out in the form of productive inputs, seed, fertilizer, storage bags, whatever it takes to help the family to grow more food and then safely store and sell it. And then because of this mechanism of working in groups, you actually have very, very good repayment rates in the area of 97, 98%, because you're working on income. Farmers are creating so much more food, they're able to repay their loan and still be much better off for their families. So that's really the main thing that we do. And then of course we pair that with training. And as you said, that is so critical. And unfortunately, in most of Africa, training is done by PhDs, people who have these advanced degrees, but aren't really from the communities that farmers are in, don't really understand the conditions they face. So we actually hire from within our farmer base, and we train those what we call field officers to go out and deliver very simple trainings. And I actually have some props with me, some examples to show you. We've got this is a fertilizer scoop. It just gives you a sense of, farmers never know exactly how much fertilizer to use, so they overuse it. And that has terrible consequences on the environment. This simple, 5-cent piece of technology can help a farmer exactly dose the right amount of food. This is a planting string. It's hard to see, but there's little red marks at the appropriate distances. This tells a family exactly how to space their seeds. Put a seed on every red mark on the string as you string it across your field. So we're talking about really simple trainings delivered by people from the community that are farmers, that understand the needs of farmers. That's really all it takes, the financial resources and the training.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, just kind of like a quick, simple tool can really make all the difference in the world when it comes to that. And it makes a lot of sense on that front as well. So I think that's a fantastic solution to kind of incorporate there. But, before we really get into what you all do and the solutions you provide to empower these farmers, communities, families, which I think is fantastic, I'd be curious to know what you think or maybe what One Acre Fund believes is, what is it about Africa? Why has Africa always been kind of a challenge to kind of improve these farming practices from an earlier stage, and why it's maybe, lack of a better word, maybe lagging behind, like you had mentioned, other parts of the world as well. What do you think has contributed to that over the previous decades?
Yeah, look, I mean, Africa has had a lot of challenges. Obviously, if we go back, more than 50 years, the colonial period, and much of these countries really robbed these countries of the resources and the good governance that they needed. And then in more recent decades, Africa has, think about its kind of north-south, kind of outlay. You don't have a lot of crops that can grow in similar parts, even within a given country. So you're talking about needing to work at very different microclimates, agroecological differences that can persist even within the same communities. So it's not as simple as in other countries where you can go in and really have one solution that applies to the vast majority of farmers in that area. So that's certainly been a challenge. And then certainly not investing as much in agriculture as we should have. But both host country governments as well as governments that do foreign aid in the developed world, for a variety of reasons, just haven't seen agriculture as a productive place to invest, and they've tried to kind of jump, I think, too quickly to manufacturing, services, things that advanced economies are. Sort of place their workers in. But if you look at, really all the success stories of the past few decades, Singapore, Taiwan, these are countries that really started with an agricultural revolution first, and then they were able to kind of move their workers to the cities and take on these different kinds of jobs. But you've got to start with agriculture. That's what the majority of people are doing. We haven't done that in Africa.
Yeah, really, I guess when you just look at the history of humankind as well, it started with agriculture,
Yeah,
right? I
absolutely.
mean, even when even when you think about the agricultural revolution, thousands, years ago, a long time, where it was like the first time humans like started to stay put instead of constantly move, right? Because they were able to grow their food and they wouldn't have to keep, foraging for food.
That's right.
I don't know, foraging for food. There we go. That's the word. The podcast host can't even formulate the sentence. There we go. Foraging for food on that front as well. So it really does all start with agriculture. So I think it's great that you all, like you had mentioned at the very beginning, and found this, identified this problem, and are now providing that solution over to Africa, and to kind of bring that agricultural revolution, and to enhance their lives over there as well. And on that note, Matt, I would love to get into the weeds and start talking in a little bit more detail about the solution that you all provided. You talked about the education, you talked about providing the tools, things of that nature as well. What does that technology and the tools look like that you're able to provide with the resources, and how does your education kind of start? Is it in the form of classroom? Is it in the form of personalized training? And kind of give us a little bit of background on that front.
Yeah, I mean, just to take you through the model, we start, as I said, with kind of forming groups of farmers, somewhere around 10 to 15 usually. These are community members that know each other quite well, want to experience the program together. They're placing orders, if you will, individually for their lands. Farmer A may decide, I'd like to grow maize on half an acre, and take an eighth of an acre of collard greens, for instance. Another farmer may have a different composition. So every farmer chooses individually what they want, but they agree to farm together as a group, be trained as a group, and repay as a group. Then obviously the most exciting day is kind of the input delivery day. That's when the seeds, the fertilizer, soil enhancements, other products are coming out for the farmers to come and pick up. Usually we're delivering these to schoolyards, churches, kind of main gathering places, but all within walking distance of the farm family. Then throughout the year, it really is about training. That's the main thing we're doing. It is in the field. It's not in the classroom. And these trainings they're fun. There's a lot of role playing involved in them. They're very experiential. That really matters. If you think about how all of us learn best, it's when there's a little bit of humor injected, when you're actually out doing we're going to be with the farmer, kind of showing that string, doing a little bit of planting with the farmer in the field, not in the classroom. So that makes a really big difference. And then, around the time harvest comes, we've gotten through all the trainings, all the parts of the, think about the life cycle of a planting season. We will have gotten through the planting, the weeding, the composting. Now we're at, harvest time. The harvest comes, a very exciting time of year. By that point, families will have finished repaying their loan generally because they've been repaying bit by bit from other income sources. And then they've got this bumper crop that they're able, again, to store safely in their home. Some of it will be consumed, some of it will be sold at local market. So that's kind of the model in a nutshell. The numbers are increases in yields, usually between 40 and 50%, and an increase in bottom line profits for the family as well around that level, even after they've repaid their loan to us. So it's a significant increase in their well-being. It's like getting a 40% raise for you or me, and it's a big deal for the families.
Yeah, I would argue that it's a much bigger deal
Yes.
than us getting a 40%
True.
raise. You know what I'm saying? I think for them, that 40% is monumental and fantastic, which is obviously why I think what you all are doing at One Acre Fund and the solution you're providing is so fantastic, especially in Africa, where unfortunately, as you mentioned before, it just has been a little bit behind due to various reasons and factors. I would love to hear about the experiences of what you encounter, with what your team encounters with these farmers. What is their feedback? What are they kind of thinking? What is their thought process? Is it one of those things where maybe they're hesitant to buy in, but then they see the results and they get all excited and like, all
Yeah.
right, here we go? Or what is that kind of like in terms of the feedback that you get from them and their interaction with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a few things I would say. One is we made the decision very early on to base our leadership in the rural areas. And so we are there with the farmers. We're living in the same communities they are. We're constantly listening to their feedback. And frankly, repayment is a phenomenal form of feedback in and of itself, right? Because if you've got, let's say, 10 districts you're working in, 9 of the districts are going really well. That 10th district, you see that the farmers have repaid only 20% of their credit, whereas in the other 9 districts, it's 40%, halfway through the year. You kind of know something's not right. It's probably our fault, not the farmers. We must have delivered the inputs later. We must have not been providing effective training or something of that nature. So that feedback is absolutely critical for us. And, we like to kind of fail fast, so we like to trial a lot of things, see what works. You get very kind of fast cycles of learning and improvement that way. We think of farmers as kind of co-designing our program, because we'll trial a new crop or a new technique or something of that nature at very small scale. We'll see if it works at that level. If it doesn't, we're back to the drawing board. If it does, we'll promote it to another kind of round of trials at bigger scale and so forth until it's scaled out across the whole network. So we have very, very good relationships with our farmers for that reason.
I love it. The whole co-design with the farmers thing to me is what really stands out, right? You're really letting the person that you're working for have an opportunity to kind of say, hey, these are the best methods
Yeah.
that work for me when it comes to the training model. Like, hey, I'm in a classroom. No, it'd be a lot better if we did this interactively out in the field instead. I think that goes a really long way and kind of a lot of success on that
That's
front
right.
too. And you mentioned, what was it, 96, 97% in the payment?
Yeah. Usually, 97, 98% is our average. It's been a little lower during COVID. We've had a number of, as you can imagine, challenges getting inputs from the ports out to the fields and then not able to do that in-field group training, which is so critical to our work when you're in a social distancing kind of space. But we've still gotten 93, 94% even during COVID, and I'm confident we'll get it back up as we get out of this. So yeah, it does give you a sense of farmers really value the program. And look, if they don't repay, we don't have any collateral, so we're not going to take away their goats or possess their home or something of that nature. The only punishment, if you will, is they can't enroll the next season until they finish repaying. So that repayment rate is also just a really good signal of, hey, is this working for the families or is it not?
A great way to establish trust as well, things of that nature, which I think is fantastic. On that
Yeah.
note too, just a little bit to kind of go into further detail on that front and talk about it. How is it that you talk about the 96 or 97, 98, 93, 94, but what other things do you do to kind of measure your impact to see what's working? I do see that there are reports that get created and things of that nature as well. How much does that help you with those reports to measure impact and to ensure that, hey, this is working, in addition to obviously getting the farmers' feedback as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we always say impact is our North Star in the sense that we are a nonprofit. Even though we have an earned income stream. We have our clients are paying for the services. We also raise donations. We have this hybrid model, but as a nonprofit, our mission is purely impact. That's the only reason we exist. And so, we care a lot about it. And during the season, we're measuring all sorts of things for very rapid feedback. What was the attendance at that training? What was the compliance with the training? In other words, when we follow up 2 weeks later, what percentage of the farmers that came to the training are actually doing the technique we taught in the right way? We have repayment, as we talked about. The big one, though, at the end of the season, again, is we're going to be measuring how much harvest came out of the ground for the 1 acre farmer versus a comparable farmer that chose not to join the program. And we have, without getting too technical, very good statistical techniques to make sure that those two sets of farmers are as identical as possible, so that we're truly measuring, how much was the benefit, the incremental benefit of the choice of that farmer to be in the 1 acre fund program versus the farmer that chose to go on their own. So that's the main thing. But then, further downstream, we've talked about, nutrition. That's something we measure. Hunger is something we measure. Soil health matters a lot. Climate resilience. So we have this sort of compendium of holistic measures, if you will, because at the end of the day, we're not only trying to solve hunger, we're trying to move these families out of poverty, make sure their children are educated, and so forth. So we measure holistically and always against this comparison group of farmers that are
Absolutely.
in
And
the
within that
program.
comparison as well, I would imagine that farmer that maybe is not part of the program, that sees maybe the farmer from the 1 acre fund have maybe more success, that might entice them to want to get involved into the program next year, huh?
That's absolutely right. It's one of the joys of this work is it's a very visual impact. So, if my maize is growing twice as high as your maize, you're probably going to be interested in why that is. So that's absolutely right. You see a lot of neighbors come into the program, after the early adopters, if you will, kind of take advantage of it, and
And with
they
that
see the
too, like what
results.
are the certain requirements maybe just to be specific for the farmer in order to enroll in your program?
Yeah, very very few actually. The main thing is just the verification that the farmer has the amount of land they say they do for the inputs they are ordering. So, if you as a farmer say you want an acre and a half of potato seed, we have to make sure that actually you have that acreage. And land titling is not common in all of our markets, so we just make sure that there's security on the land. The farmer is able to claim that land as their own. And then you have to join in groups, and that's pretty much it. There are no other requirements. As a nonprofit, we're trying to reach into the poorest areas, so we're not looking at credit scores or anything of that nature, and they don't typically exist anyway. We feel it's our job to reach into those poorest segments and actually help these families. For many of them, it's the first time they're ever accessing credit. So
Awesome.
we
And
see that
then
as part of our mission.
my favorite part about that is you say it's the first time or blah blah blah, and if this was a bank or a for-profit model, that might be a little bit of hesitant in terms of offering repayment plans. But then you get the success that you're having with those rates, and I love how encouraging that is. 97, 98, 93, 94 COVID. You got to love that.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. I mean, that again, I can't say it enough that I think one of the big reasons that this market failure has existed for so long is you have either private companies coming in, with only a profit motive. They're going to end up creaming off the best farmers. They're going to be looking for farmers with, 10, 15, 20 acres of land, commercial farmers, etc. That's great. Those farmers still need services. They can work with private companies, but they're not going to reach into the areas we do. And then, a lot of charity models, fully 100% donation models have come in and tried to help farmers in Africa over the years. And again, they probably do really good work, but you can't scale if you don't have another revenue source. So I think this kind of hybrid model, some of it is donations, a lot of it though is repayments from the farmers being treated as customers. That model of social enterprise really is perfect for this kind of a problem, and frankly many others
Yeah,
in
it's a
Africa as
reinvestment,
well.
basically. You're just taking this person's success, using that reinvestment in the funds they're doing to help somebody else and get their success. And it's a circular cycle that I
That's
think works
exactly right.
fantastically on that front as well. I want to talk a little bit about these numbers because you mentioned the families that you impact, the farmers that you impact. We touched on it briefly before, but tell us a little bit about how many farmers you're actually helping in terms of you're working with throughout the history of of 1 Acre Fund in that front as well. And then in addition to that, not only just kind of the farmers and whatnot that you're helping, but also, what that kind of means in terms of tangible impact and growth for the sector.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we started with just 40 families in Western Kenya back in 2006. And this year we will reach about 1.5 million farm families across 9 countries. So it has been really, really rapid growth. Again, I think we designed our model from the beginning for scale in terms of, it was important for us to kind of codify all of our protocols for, okay, when you enter a particular village, how do you hire staff? How do you kind of market the program to, village elders and religious leaders and other chiefs, to make sure they understand who we are, how we operate. Obviously the training, the repayment collection, all of it is routinized so that it's very easy for us to pick it up, move it to a new village, etc. So this year we'll work with, about 1.5 million families directly. We also will work with about 1.5 million through partnerships. That's been a more recent channel for us. We found a lot of interest among seed companies and local governments who are running some sort of farm service or product, for us to come in and take what we've learned and to help them do their work better. So all told, it'll be over 3 million families that we'll work with this year alone. And on the impact side, again, the main impact is boosting these families' bottom line profits 40 to 50%. But in terms of, in human terms of what that means, it's going to be an elimination of the most severe forms of hunger. And then it's going to be the family choosing what to do with that. Some families are going to invest in education. As I mentioned, that's the most common one. Other families may choose to invest in healthcare, housing, a whole litany of things that they may choose to do. Last thing I'll say is for families that re-enroll in the program year after year, you see even better results. So, by year 5, year 6 in the program, we have a study in Kenya that shows that those families have actually improved their entire household income by 50%. And not just kind of the crops that they grow with us. And that really speaks to the kind of the flywheel, right? That you make a little bit more income, you invest it productively, that generates even more income. You enroll more land with 1 Acre Fund, you rent more land and maybe grow new crops that are more profitable, so on and so forth. And we have a lot of families that have really gotten onto that much deeper level of
Amazing.
impact.
And within that as well, you mentioned, just kind of it's empowering the families to kind of do what they want, right? With that extra money that they're going to have and things of that nature as well. And then you mentioned that the people that stay on the program, with the 50% overall household income increase on that front as well. What is kind of the average life cycle, if you will? I don't want to say like customer life cycle. That sounds too businessy for profit, but you know what I mean? But, how long do these farmers typically stay into the program before they're like, okay, hey, we have it down, like we're going to be able to keep going? Or is it something that does kind of last year in, year in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, what we typically find is that the year over year retention rates are usually somewhere in the area of 70 to 80%. And some of the farmers that aren't re-enrolling, some didn't repay and aren't able to re-enroll. But for the most part, it's either, again, there was some really, really significant issue in their lives that caused them to not come back into the program. It may have been even beyond what their group was comfortable covering them for. Or it could be, the families on the other end who are choosing, let me try it myself now. I think I've gotten things down pat. I guess what our experience has been is that, these communities are, there are so many challenges that they face that the kind of set of services around them outside of 1 Acre Fund has not been sufficient for families to really be able to go it on their own for long periods of time. Just to give you one example, over the past 5 years, we've had 3 very, very bad crop diseases on the main staple crop of maize. And, if you were a family who chose not to re-enroll with 1 Acre Fund, you are now missing new trainings and new products that 1 Acre Fund kind of rolled out in real time to deal with the latest pest, or 1 Acre Fund provides crop insurance with all of our loans. Let's say you chose to re-enroll in a very bad year for rainfall. Well, you didn't have access to that insurance that 1 Acre Fund provides. You might have really suffered. So, look, our long-term goal, we'd love to work ourselves out of business. And in fact, our original business plan was work in a community 5 years, get that community to self-sufficiency and move on. I think the reality is these are really, these are decades long challenges. And we're proud in our partnerships unit to try to make everything else around One Acre Fund better, so that farmers don't have to work with us. But we see that these challenges are often insurmountable for some of these families.
Absolutely, especially when you add in the growing, y'all started a couple decades ago about, and even within that, I feel like things have changed, especially with the knowledge, for example, climate change and the most infrequent droughts and things of that nature with rain and how that affects stuff as
Absolutely.
well. So I definitely, I want to move forward and kind of ask in that sense, what have you kind of seen from there? How has One Acre Fund been able to kind of pivot with those solutions? Because this is where the roots of climate change really is, right? It's not here in the US where, it gets hot. Like, yes, that's a sign, but where it's really damaging and hurting people is, for example, in the farms or people who live right on the coast and things of that nature as well. So can you just kind of go over and enlighten the listeners a little bit on what that looks like in terms of the new challenges and then the solutions you've been providing to that?
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because look, the small scale farmers in Africa, they are the least responsible for the climate mess that we are in, and yet they have the most to lose. They are the world's most vulnerable because their lives depend on the weather, and all related aspects. So, look, this is an existential issue for farmers. If you look at, obviously the models are all over the place, but somewhere between 20 and 40% predicted yield losses on rain-fed crops. The main crops. This is maize, rice, wheat, potatoes, etc. And so, but it is a slow-moving kind of train wreck, if you will. And so we are seeing the starts of it, and we now have time to adjust. And so, we are doing everything from, first of all, better insurance products, right? Helping to attract more capital to help farmers deal with erratic weather and diseases and things like that. Second of all, crop diversification. How do we ensure that families aren't only planting crops that are dependent on the rains as much as maize and some of these dominant crops are? Third thing is seed research, right? If we can come up with seeds that are drought tolerant, quicker yielding for heat stress, basically, that's going to help these families quite a bit. And then the last thing is, how can we get more economic activity on things that don't depend as much on the weather? Tree planting has become a really big thing that One Acre Fund does. Trees, you do want to plant them and water them in year one, but they do not depend nearly as much on the weather as other forms of crops do. Also really good for returning nutrients into the soils and then mopping up carbon, as we discussed earlier. Poultry is another thing we're working on with families. How do we help families to access eggs and chicks and rear them until they're able to produce on their own? That's not as dependent on the weather. So really trying to diversify not only within crops, but outside of crops. So there's more economic activity going for these families.
Very interesting. Yeah, diversification, like a lot of things in life, really is key and crucial in this aspect as well. I'm curious as when did it come? When for One Acre Fund? I mean, obviously the climate's always been a challenge for y'all, right? Because you're measuring, hey, is it going to be rain? But when did you guys really kind of go, oh, okay, we're going to have to kind of turn on the jets a little bit here and really kind of think about this diversification and find these solutions?
Yeah, I would say it really was about 5, 6 years ago when we started seeing just more erratic weather events. And, I think for the first 10 years or so of our work, we had almost, apart from 1 or 2 out of 10 seasons, really adequate rainfall at the right times. And then we just hit a spell of, gosh, at least 2 markets every year having really, really poor outcomes for farmers. And, obviously this also coincided with a greater consciousness of all of us for what, we're going through. And so we just realized, look, yes, our main kind of impact can remain productivity. That's fine. We can still say that we're primarily measuring our success by how much more food's coming out of the ground, but we've got to equally work on resilience in this next decade and do things that really satisfy us that at the start of the year, before the year has even started, we can go in saying, a 1 acre fund farmer is much, much more protected for whatever may come that year than everyone else. And that's our goal.
That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. Matt, too, you've mentioned this a couple times, and I absolutely want to give you a chance to elaborate on it a little bit more. Talk about these partnerships that you have. Obviously they play an important role. They're helping you impact more than 1 million more farmers, farming families on that front too. So tell us a little bit more about these partnerships and their role in this growth as well.
Yeah, again, I think this is one of these things where, as a nonprofit, but also a social enterprise, we have a lot of leeway to figure out, how can we make everyone else around us better. And if you, give you two examples, there are very large and extensive national government training services across most of our countries, where the government has organized training agents to go out and train farmers for free. And they now look at us and say, 1 acre fund, you've been doing training for a long time, seem to be getting really good results. Would you come in and train our trainers? Would you give them your curriculum? Would you help them understand your pedagogy? This more in-field kind of fun approach, role-playing approach to doing training. And that's one way we can multiply our impact. Those trainers are reaching farmers that are choosing not to be in 1 acre fund, and that's fine. And we're happy to do that. Another example would be on the private sector side. There's a big kind of, excuse the metaphor, chicken or egg problem in kind of cash crop agriculture. So when we're talking about, let's say, avocados or macadamia nuts or a crop like that, where it's not really as much about the family consuming it as it is about selling it for a lot of money. You have a lot of companies that maybe, let's say, are processors of these crops. Let's say they are creating avocado oil, or they're actually exporting grade A fresh avocados to Europe. They don't want to invest, they don't want to grow if they can't be confident that there's a large installed farmer base that's going to produce these crops at high quality and get them the supply that they need. And that's something 1 acre fund can really solve, because we're working with, most of these countries, hundreds of thousands of farmers. We can say, look, we've got this big base of farmers. We can guarantee the production side is going to go well. That's what we know. But you guys have to scale. You have to be able to offtake a lot more avocados. Be able to get a price premium for 1 acre fund farmers, and then we're going to both be better off. So that's a good example of being able to use that customer base to help. These are private sector companies, profit motive, and that's fine. And we're helping them to do better as well.
Matt, one thing I want to just say to start too, which I think is really great about what you guys are all doing, kind of this hybrid model too, is the constant, what you've been saying throughout this whole podcast. The message is our goal is to kind of, hey, maybe self-sustainable. Well, okay, maybe that's not there. So we're going to be, longtime partners. Okay, well, how else can we create more impact? Now you have your partnerships with the for-profit companies, things of that nature as well, which I love. I think that that's such a cool way to approach it from your own business perspective on that front. I wanted to say that too. And I would be curious too, before we kind of dive into some ways people can get involved and support and help kind of push this mission forward and the solution to the forefront. What kind of responses do you get, or do you deal much with the governments of these countries? And what countries do you work with specifically in Africa across the continent?
Yeah, so in terms of our footprint, we are working primarily in East and Southern Africa. Our biggest markets are Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi, all in the Lake Victoria region. But we're also working in Tanzania, Uganda, Malawi, and then we have smaller pilot programs in Zambia, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. So those are our 9 markets. And what's kind of neat is that you've got about 70% of Africa's farmers in those 9 markets. And so we feel like we now have kind of the footprint we need to keep growing within markets to be able to really solve a big chunk of the problem now. And yeah, in terms of how we work with governments, it's interesting. In the early years of 1 acre fund, we really did try to stay away from engaging with government. We wanted to kind of focus on building our program. We wanted to make sure that we were delivering impact. Once we got to a place where we felt like, okay, we have enough proof points, we then began to really engage government as a partner and be able to work with them in the kind of area I mentioned before. If there's a nationwide training force that's government organized, also on policy projects, right? We found, for instance, in one of our countries that there was a law on the books against farmers intercropping. In other words, putting maize and beans together in the same part of the field. It was based on some outdated research. We were able to bring government officials to our nursery stations and show them the kind of results that come from intercropping and get that law changed. So we're finding just a lot more opportunities to work with governments, national level governments on policy, local level governments as well, in a variety of ways, and generally have found a lot of receptivity to what we're able to do.
You love to hear it, right? I mean, it's hard to, I don't know why they'd be against what you'd want to do, but that's bureaucracy at times as well. So happy to hear that it's pretty good
Yeah.
on that front too. Matt, now I'd love to dive into ways that people can really kind of perhaps get involved, contribute, follow along. Any ways that people who might be listening that go, wow, Matt, I love what One Acre Fund's doing. I want to get involved and I want to move forward with it, right? I mean, what I personally love about your mission is that it's attacking the problem at the root and providing a solution there. I mean, trust me, giving money to families and stuff like that, like some of the programs out there, I mean, that's all great. But what you're doing is providing tools that's ultimately going to be a long-term solution for them to really kind of push themselves forward. So I want to just give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about how people can follow along and potentially donate and things of that nature.
Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, this is a case where we're really giving families a hand up. I mean, that's it. It's not a handout. These are families who are primarily contributing their own capital in terms of taking on these loans and repaying these loans from their own resources. And, when we started One Acre Fund, it used to be that we would require about $240 a year in donated resources to be able to serve a family. We've now brought that down to about $25 a year. So you're talking about a family average size of 6 people. We're talking about just $25 of donated resources that is going to help that family, that farmer, to feed her children. These are primarily women, to feed her children all year round. That's all it takes. And so, we always encourage people that want to get involved, that want to sort of understand this issue and invest in programs that really empower people to come and join what we call our investment council. These are families in the U.S., Europe, anywhere that choose to give $20 or more a month. It's enough to basically get an entire group on the program with what it costs us these days. We're talking about entire group, 10 to 15 families, somewhere between 60 and 80 or so people into our program. So that we always, deeply appreciate, because it's really the primary way we grow. We can raise more resources, then we can enroll more families, and then you pay once, and then the family's able to sustain themselves in the program all the years thereafter. But that said, there are many other ways to get involved. One primary way we always mention is local talent. We're always looking to hire African leaders to run our markets. I hope some of the listeners may have connections with folks in Africa, and really encourage them to tell their networks to look at our roles on our website. We now hire about 90% of our senior roles locally from the African markets, and obviously that's great. We want to be a program that can sustain for the long term. So really do encourage that as well. We do have an annual event in Chicago every year. So for those based in Chicago, it'll be October 6th this year. You can get more about that on our website. Also can sign up for our newsletter on our website as well.
Love it. You sign up for the newsletter. Y'all got social media pages that are active?
Yes, and thank you. Absolutely. And, I have to say I hope this is a useful education of what we're doing, but just take a moment and watch some of the videos on our Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, or, one of our channels, LinkedIn. It's incredible to kind of see what these families have to deal with and the challenges they face, and to just watch kind of the program being delivered in action and the results at the end. It's very moving. We have a lot of good video content. Always encourage people to watch and also to educate your children on it. For those with families, it's really important for the next generation to understand how the rest of the world lives and what are the kinds of programs that are out there that can help these families to create change for themselves, basically.
Yeah, I mean, call it a cliche if you will, but there's nothing better to me than education and knowledge, and to be able to promote that via social media, to actually give access. I mean, you could say social media is bad. but social media in this case, very good. Creates a lot of awareness on
Yes.
that front. Creates a lot of awareness of what you're seeing and what you're doing. And because I think some people get a little out of touch of, especially when you think about, climate change or something like that. Some people, maybe don't think about outside of their little bubble. And it's
Yeah.
important to see that. So I encourage everybody on that point. So please go give them a follow. I've checked them out on social media. They have fantastic content on that front. If you're going to be in Chicago, certainly plan to go to that later this year as well. And then, of course, if you know anybody in Africa, I know there's a few of you listening that got contacts in Africa. And so go ahead and make that connection, if you will, on that front. See if there's potential opportunity there, if it's within those 9 countries and areas that are there. Matt, anything else that you would like to add as well with this too? Because I also do want to ask you before we do that, I rescind that last question, Matt. All right, I'll give you the
No.
opportunity in a minute, but I want to know what some of those goals long term are for One Acre Fund. You've mentioned a few things kind of throughout the show, but I would like to give you a chance to kind of talk about future plans.
Yeah, so for us, we've set a new. We when we started One Acre Fund, we had a goal of reaching 1 million farm families by 2020. We got there a year early, and at that juncture, we set a new goal of 10 million farm families by 2030. So that's really kind of what we're aiming for. I think a lot of those families will be through partners now, and again, that is great in terms of creating a more durable change, more long-lasting change. Governments, private sector will always be in Africa, etc. And I would say just alongside that, really important that we are also kind of improving our impact for every family, all 10 million of those families. So we have a goal of really having at least 3 climate resilient interventions adopted per family over the next 3 years, and it should grow beyond that. We want every family to have insurance, tree planting, poultry. We talked about some of these things during the podcast. We want to prepare families for what's coming. So that is kind of our twin objective alongside the number of families that we're trying to reach.
Love it. Preparation, education, all key. Matt, with that, anything else that you would like to add onto the episode before I let you go here?
I would just say that, and again, I hope folks will see this if they're able to watch some of the video footage that we have. That these families are among the hardest working people on the planet. They get up way before the sun comes out. They are tending to their farm all day long. As I said, the vast majority of farmers in our program are women, and so they're taking care of their children while they're dealing with the farm, and they don't go to bed till very late. These are very, very hardworking, also deeply spiritual people. They really are good people, and they've just been lacking, again, kind of the kind of investments that many of us have benefited from over the years. Some of our families have been able to make in us to be able to go to school and break out. And I just hope that we'll see a lot more capital and opportunity being steered to Africa. It's hard to believe, but 80% of the world's population growth this century is going to be in Africa. And so in many ways, where Africa goes, the world is going to go. And I just hope all of us are able to bring more attention to the opportunities that exist to really make this the century of Africa.
Fantastic. For as little as $25, you can help contribute to this as well. Okay. You can go check them out on their website. On that note, oneacrefund.org. Follow them across social media as well, called One Acre Fund. If you don't have time to donate now, go ahead, give a follow, create awareness. That's obviously really important as well to kind of spread resources on that front too, and really help empower these women some more that are raising their kids, attending to the farm, getting their kids ready to get into education. I mean, it's just so much work that these people are doing, and they deserve the help as well on that front. And yeah, let's make this the century of Africa, the century of growth.
Absolutely.
Over in Africa and development. Obviously, in the last couple of decades, a little bit more than that too, we've seen a lot of investing in innovation in Africa, and we want to continue to do so as well. But Matt, I just want to say I've very much enjoyed this conversation. I thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your expertise with us and bringing some awareness, and more importantly, bringing a solution to this problem and the awareness as well. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Same here. Really enjoyed it, and just thanks to everyone for listening and getting engaged.
Fantastic. That is joining us, the managing director of One Acre Fund, Mr. Matt Forti, on the Talkin Solutions podcast. As I mentioned before, you can go check them out on their website. That is oneacrefund.org. We'll have their links available on our social media platforms as well, in addition to having more information set on the website for you all to check out too, and to get easy access to them in case you're listening on the go and you're driving or something, you can't write it down. Don't worry, we got your back. Just when you're in the next safe spot or whatever, you can go ahead at it and then give a follow and potentially donate if you have the opportunity on that front. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Talkin Solutions podcast. As always, I appreciate you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead, drop a review, leave us a comment, leave us something on social media as well, provide some feedback, and please subscribe if you like this content. But until next time, I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their week. Thanks for listening to the Talkin Solutions with the Chesh podcast. Tune in every Wednesday for a new episode, and you can find out more about our featured guests and their solutions on our Talkin Solutions podcast Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channels, as we focus on highlighting individuals providing solutions to social problems and bringing optimism to the world.